Yeah. Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Today we'll talk about three important functions. Okay, which are call, apply, and bind functions. Okay. So let me start here. How to create an object? Can someone tell me? How to create an object?
With
Variable.
object name and keys and values or
Yeah.
properties and values.
So we'll have one object one, okay? And we'll just open with curly braces what it contains, key and values, okay? So it will be first name, okay? And first name will be Ansha, okay? Then we can have last name, okay? Last name and its value is okay, right? Okay. Now suppose I want to print my full name. So I can even declare a function in the object, right? How can I declare? I can just give print full name, okay, as a key, and value will be what? Anonymous function, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what it will do, it will just do console.log of this dot first name, okay, this dot last name. What is the meaning of this here means refer to this object one meaning. So inside the object one, we contain this first name and second name, right? So this first name of object one refer to, that is the meaning of this keyword here. So this dot first name and this dot second name. Any doubts, anyone? So if we want to invoke this function, how can we do it? So if we want to invoke the function print full name, how can we do it? Suppose if I want to get first name, just the first name using object, how can we get? How can we print it? Okay.
This dot first name.
No, I want to get outside of this function. Okay.
Object name with first name. Object name dot first name.
Object name dot first name. Okay. Now let me print first name and let me save it and let me run it. You see, Anusha is the first name. Suppose if I want to get there is also another way I told, right? You can even use braces with quotations. Okay. This is the another way to access the object properties. Any doubts, anyone? Okay, two ways are there. This is the first way and that is the second way. Okay. Now, how if I want to print last name, what should I do?
In the place of first name, last name.
Yeah.
Object.
So in the place of first name, you will just give object one dot last name.
Last.
Okay. Now let me just print it. Okay. Now how to invoke this function? Now how to invoke the print full name function? Straight away simple like this properties.
Object one dot print full name function.
Yeah. Print full name. Will you give, are you invoking this function or not?
Yes.
No. What we should do to invoke it? What, how we normally invoke the function?
Parentheses.
Function name parent.
Parent. Then this object will be invoked and it will print these two things for me. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, these two things. Am I right? Anusha dot Kokera, Anusha Kokera. Okay. So why it printed undefined here? Anyone can tell me? This console log printed undefined, right? Why? So I got the desired
Empty
output.
braces.
What? I got the desired output. This statement got printed. Okay. When I am trying to print object one dot print full name, it gave me undefined. So why it printed undefined? What is the return type of this function?
Anonymous function.
Anonymous function.
What is the return type?
Self-invoking.
Are we returning anything out of this function?
No.
Then what will be the return type?
Undefined.
The return type is void. It will return undefined, right?
Void.
Suppose if I return this dot first name, okay. Now you can see the difference. Anusha print full name. So we are invoking this function as well as I am printing like what's the return type here. Since before nothing is there, it returned nothing. Since I am returning first name now, so first name is returned. Any doubts till now?
No.
Okay. This is fine. Okay. Now I have one more object. Okay. For example, object 2. And I want this object also has same properties like first name, last name, and print full name. Okay. But we are creating duplicate code, right? Suppose in a class, if there are 50 students, for 50 students, we will not be creating this entire functions, right? Object 1, Anusha, then Kokera, then print full name like that. Correct. So for that, what we will do, we will just separate this code. Okay. Functions should be unique. Okay. So if a single function, okay, is being accessed by multiple objects, then that function should not be sustained to only the object 1. It should be kept outside and the object 1, object 2, object 3, object 100 will be accessing that. Okay. Now how to create a normal function? Using a variable, we can just give print full names. Okay. And we can assign an anonymous function. This dot first name console.log of this dot first name, this dot last name. Any doubts, anyone? Now if I just do print full name invocation, okay, now what will be printed?
First name, last name.
Kokera.
And undefined.
I just had one object, okay. I just had one variable print full name. For this, I am assigning one function which will print first name and the last name, okay. And I am invoking this function invocation. Now what will be printed?
Undefined.
Kokera and undefined.
Yeah, it will print undefined because we are not telling this should be pointed to which object, right? By default, in this function, it will check first name and last name are present or not. It's not there. So it will check in the global execution context 1. There is only object 1, but no other variables named first name or last name. That's why it will print undefined and undefined. Suppose, okay, if we want this object, okay, for this object, if we want to call this function, then how can we do it? We can just use, okay, call function here, okay, print full name dot call. Call for which object? Object 1.
Object 1.
Yeah. Now if you save it, Anusha.
Also known as Geo.
Now let me create one more object, okay? Let object 2. Okay. Name or the same things. Okay. And here I'll sweetie. Sweet. Okay. Now if I want to apply this print full name to this object too, how can I do it? So like first object printed this Anusha Kokera, right? In the similar way, I want to print sweetie sweet. Okay, then how can I do it? You have seen it here, right?
Print
Okay,
name dot call of object two.
correct. Print full name
Full name dot call
or
of
call of object two.
object two.
So what it will do? Now this will point to the second object. In case of first call, this will be pointing to the first object. Okay. Any doubts, anyone? Till
No.
here? Okay. Now, suppose if I want to pass some third parameter. Okay. Suppose I want to receive hometown. Okay. And I want to print here hometown. Okay. Now, how can I do it? I can just pass some string here. Am I correct? I can
No.
pass Guntur. Okay. Now we will save it. Okay. Now we will just print it. You see Anusha Kokera Guntur. Okay. You can see the second one, right? Sweetie sweet undefined. Why it printed undefined?
We did not declare any.
Any object.
Can pass any value. By default, when this global execution context is created, hometown value got assigned with undefined and undefined got printed. Any doubts, anyone? Okay. Suppose if I want to pass some more parameters like state. Okay. I will just send here as AP. Okay. Now what will be printed?
Anusha Kokera,
Undefined and
Kokera, Guntur,
undefined. AP undefined.
undefined for second object, but not for the first object. Since
First object.
yeah. And suppose there is also one more. Okay, pin code. Okay. And I will just pass the pin code here. Just a moment. Now, can you check? Since I haven't passed anything, undefined.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So this is the usage of call function basically. Okay. Now we will talk about apply function. So even for the same purpose we are using apply, the only difference is that you are passing the extra parameters here, right? Like Guntur, AP and so on and so on. These you will pass it is in an array format. That's the only difference. For example, you can say, let me just comment out this. Okay. And I will just do print full name dot apply. Okay. Apply for object 2 and pass the parameters as Bengal MP. Okay. 522347. Okay. Now I will just save it. Okay. I will just run it. You can see Sweetie Sweet Bengal MP 522347. The only difference is that here the arguments we will pass in array format. Here in the comma separation we will be passing it. So this is actually an important interview question. They will ask you about what is call, apply and bind function. Any doubts till now? Okay. No doubts, right? Now I will talk about the bind function. Okay, bind function is different from this call and apply. It directly binds the function to that object. Okay, for example, you can have one variable, print details. Okay, for this, what I will do, print full name dot bind of object2. So what I am doing, I am just binding this function. Okay, and if I just do console.log of print details, you will see the same function. Okay, suppose if you want to invoke it in the later terms, okay, you will be just invoking it and you will pass normal arguments we will pass for our object, right? Functions, right? Like Bangalore, Karnataka, and double. Okay. Now, can you see the difference? It's like normal invocation. The bind function will just bind this function to this object, and these can be invoked at the later time, and you can pass whatever values you want. Suppose if you don't pass anything, what will be printed by default? Undefined.
Undefined.
Any doubts, anyone, this concept? Call, apply, and bind.
Repeat bind again.
Okay. So bind function is entirely different from call and apply. So if you are doing a binding, which means that this particular function will get binded for this object. Okay. For example, you can take let print some details, okay, as one variable. This print full name, okay, you are binding, for example, for object one now, okay, you are binding it for the object one. So this some details is nothing but this print full name function, okay, which is binded to object one.
Object one.
Okay, now if I just do console.log of print details, it will print the exact function. Okay, exact function it will print. Suppose if you want to invoke it, you can just invoke it like a normal function invocation, and you can pass whatever arguments you want to pass to that function. You can see. So since it's binded to the first object, it will take this dot first name and this dot last name in the first object, and other details will be undefined. Suppose if you pass some data, okay. Karnataka and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now you can check. Okay. Suppose if it's binded to object 2. Okay. Now you can see sweet is sweet. Any doubts, anyone?
No.
Okay. So this is regarding the call, apply, and bind functions, which are very like bind function they will ask most frequently in the interviews. Now I will talk about promises. Okay. You know, right? JavaScript is normally a what language? Synchronous language, right? So it will execute everything line by line. Am I correct?
Yes.
So we have a concept called promises, okay, which is basically used for handling asynchronous code. So when we will be getting asynchronous code is basically in case of set timeout, what's happening? We are waiting for some time and then we are executing the console log statements, if you remember, correct? So the code running is not synchronous, it's asynchronous. Okay. For handling asynchronous code, we will be using some promises. Okay. And I will tell you how to declare a promise, create a promise, and how to use it. Okay. Suppose we have one promise, okay, one variable, my promise. Okay, you can keep it anything as your name wish, as this is just creation of a variable. Promise you will create with new keyword, new promise. Okay, and it will take two parameters. Okay, one is resolve. Okay, and another one is reject. It's like a callback function. Okay, so you need to write some logic in your function. For example, you have one x here, x equal to 1. Okay, what you are doing, if x value equal to 0, then what you will do, you will resolve the promise. Promise is resolved. Else reject, promise is rejected. Okay, and you can just invoke the promise using dot. Then I will just give a brief summary after writing this code. Okay. Okay. So have you ever used Google Chrome or mobile phones, right? We will be using in our day-to-day life. Suppose if we are hitting one website, okay, for example, www.something.com, okay. Suppose what happens, if you get a successful response, this page will be displayed. If you get a negative, if you get an error stating that the website you have provided is incorrect or something, you will be getting this type of websites, right? You cannot reach to this website since URL is wrong. Suppose instead of this, if you specify correct URL, okay, you will be getting successful response. You understood between the successful response and error? You understood, right?
Yes.
If it's success,
Yes.
successful page will be displayed. Suppose if the URL you have provided is wrong, you will be getting some wrong response. Okay. Basically, the promise resolve is like that. You are creating a promise. Okay. In the successful response, do something. Okay. If the error scenario, do something. That is the concept used for resolve and reject. Okay, so if the resolve is done, then what you should do next? If it is rejected, then what you should do next? That kind of information we will be providing in the promise. Okay, the promise has to be then okay, you have created this promise. In order to resolve that promise, basically that this piece of code has to be executed. Okay, this is just an assignment, right? So if this piece of code wants to be executed, then you will give just dot then function. Okay, dot then function. So it takes two callbacks. Though this callbacks is printed in case of successful response, and this callback is printed in case of error response. Any doubts, anyone? Shall I repeat the concept again?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes,
promises,
repeat.
Yeah, promises are basically used for handling asynchronous data. Okay, if you want to create, they will ask you in the interviews, create one promise. Okay, you can just do something like this. For example, you are creating one promise. In general terms, resolve means if you are getting any successful response, okay, you will be resolving the promise. In case of any error response, you will be rejecting that promise. Okay, for example, here is the simple logic I returned for resolving and rejecting. What I am doing, I have initialized x variable with 1. So if the x value equal to 0, then resolve this promise. In the console, you will be getting promise is resolved. Okay, this is like you have hit the API and you got successful response. Then you are getting successful response. Okay, suppose if this condition is not satisfied, then what you are doing, you are just rejecting this promise. So this entire promise, you have just assigned it to an variable. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So in order to invoke this promise, you need to get dot then function. You need to use just dot then. Okay. So you have created the promise and you will invoke the promise by using dot then function. In the dot then function, then what you will do? So it will take two callbacks. Okay. One callback is for successful response. So if the promise is resolved, okay, this callback will get executed. Okay, console.log of got successful response. Okay. In case of error, okay, error block you will specify with comma again. Okay, and you will just give one more callback function and you will declare it as an error. Okay, whatever response you got also you can print here. Okay, and you can take console.log of error. Okay, error. So basically the response here means successful here means this promise is resolved will get printed here. Okay, in case of error means the promise is rejected will get printed. Let me save it and show you. Why we got promise is rejected error?
Because the condition is
X
false.
value
1
is
is not equal
1.
to 0.
Yes. Suppose if I give x equal to 0, now you can see promise is resolved. Any doubts, anyone?
No.
Yeah. Any doubts? Little bit
No.
understood. So if you keep on working on the promises, no, then you will get the full clarity of like what to do, how to write everything and all. Okay. So you can just think that promise means it is promising you that it will either give you successful response or failure response, but it will definitely give some response to you. Okay. Suppose if those conditions are satisfied, then it will give you the correct successful response. If the conditions were not satisfied, then it will reject that promise. Okay. It will keep the promise or it will reject the promise. Promise is nothing but it is promising you that I will give some response whenever I am invoked. Okay, suppose you can see it promise is invoked by using dot then function. In case of successful response, you will be having two callbacks separated by comma. So you can take successful response or you can take whatever error you have. Any doubts, anyone? A promise can be either in two states only. Okay, either it can be rejected or either it can be resolved, but not two in the.
Resolved.
Sorry. Understood, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now we will do one server call. Okay, using JavaScript. We have one function called fetch. Okay, which is basically used for doing the API calls. Okay, we have some websites which provide some APIs. Okay. Here is one website is there. Okay. So you can see this API URL. This has been hoisted. Okay. Suppose if you click on this, you'll get some lots information. You're seeing it, right? So basically a server response will look something like this. Okay. When you are working on any projects or anything. So now we will write some piece of code. Okay. So what we are doing just a fetch call. Okay. We will give fetch. Okay. Fetch is nothing but its return type is promise. Okay. Suppose if you want to invoke it, then what we should do? How to invoke a promise?
Dot then.
Dot then
Yes. So in the fetch, you will be
Dot
giving
then
the
function.
URL directly. Okay. Then what you will do, you can do dot then. Okay. I said there will be two types of responses, right? Data. Okay. Which takes the successful response. You can give data or response, whatever you want. Okay. Response. And then what you can do, you can just do console.log of response. So what happens in the JavaScript? Okay, you will not actually get the original data, original API response. One second. So what's happening? It is just returning the data and this response is there. In order to see this response in the JavaScript, we need to first convert it to an JSON object. Okay. So what is JSON object basically? As I was informing you, the servers will take data, okay, in the JavaScript object notation format, which is called JSON. Okay. Either sending the data or receiving the data from the API will happen like that using the JSON format. Okay. Suppose in this network call, you can see this right in the headers. I have made this call and this is the successful response. Are you able to see it? Yes. So if you see this, so you can see this is just a response. Okay. But I got this response in a different format. If you can see in the network tab, it's like it's the actual response, but in the console, I have received something else. Okay. It's basically like it's telling what URL I have given, what type, what headers, what is the status. 200 means successful response. Okay. You can check it here. You just check in the headers. Status code 200 means it's a successful response. Get means which means that you are getting some information in this URL. Suppose if it is a post or update or anything like that, that means you are passing some data. For example, in the forms you will be filling some data and you will be sending it to the servers, right? Then those types of calls will be post type, and here the request method will be post. Okay. This status code 200 meaning is that it is successful. Green means successful. Okay. Now we need to do some massaging in order to print in our console and access it entirely in our file. Okay. We can do that by converting to JSON. Okay. So what we can do, response.toJSON. response dot to JSON. Okay. Now, what is the return types of this JSON? This JSON return type is also a promise. Okay. So how to invoke a promise? Suppose if I just print it, okay, you might be understanding what is this. Okay. Suppose if you are writing only, normally how we will write a callback function like this, right? Am I correct? Am I correct? Hello? Able to hear me? Okay, let me tell you again. Okay, this dot then receives a callback function, right? How to write a callback function? How to write an arrow function?
Function name dot
Arrow function, arrow function. What is an arrow function?
Empty
Empty parentheses, then arrow, then like this, right?
arrow.
Correct.
Yes.
So in this empty parenthesis, what you are getting? You are getting some response. Okay. Now, if you are having only single parameter, then we need not to give braces. So this and this are same. Got it? Suppose if you are getting two extra parameters, okay, two extra parameters, then you need to give these braces. Okay. In case of a single value, you need not to give the braces. Any doubts, anyone? Any doubts? Just tell us or no.
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 Okay. Now, when we will give curly braces, when we have more than one statement, we will give curly braces, right? As I told you in the if statements as well. So when you have group of statements, and if you want to filter that group of statements, then you will be using curly braces, right? Suppose if you have only one single statement, okay, then you need not to use those curly braces. So this is also an arrow function which takes one parameter response and it is returning response.json. Okay, suppose if I give curly braces to this single line, then I need to keep the return. Okay, otherwise this is similar to return JSON with curly braces. Any doubts, anyone? Any doubts?
No.
Okay. Then if you hover on this method, you can see JSON and you see colon and then type, right? This colon specify, suppose if you want to specify any type for this, whatever you are using, okay, then they will be inbuiltly given in this Visual Studio. Okay, they were telling the return type of JSON will be a promise. Now, how to invoke a promise?
Dot
Dot then function.
Dot then function.
Dot then.
Then what it will expect?
response. Something.
Response.
It will expect one successful response. What is that? It is nothing but an arrow function, right? Now what you can do, you can just do console log the data. Okay. Now let me just print it. Understood? You are able to see the data, right? The exact data what is given in the network.
Yes.
This is how you will be making an API call. And this is the website which you can use for practicing. Okay. Here, not only this link, okay, many things you can even use this URL. You can use this URL. Okay. Any URL, whatever you want, you can use it. I'm just pinging in the chat. You can make a copy of it. Okay. So if you want to practice now how to make an API call, you can just use this website and do the API call. Okay. What is it for making an API call in the JavaScript? You will be using some function called fetch. Fetch you will give, and to the fetch you will be passing some URL. Since the return type of the fetch is an promise, you need to invoke this promise using dot then function. Okay. And the response, whatever we get, has to be converted to the JSON. And since it has to be converted to JSON, JSON is again a promise. Then in order to access the data, you need to use dot then function and you can access your data directly. Till now, any doubts, anyone?
Explain once again this page.
Okay. Which one? The entire fetch.
Fetch.
Okay. So fetch function is basically used for making API calls. Okay. So suppose if you give the wrong URL and I will save it. Okay. Then I will just show you what will happen in case of a wrong response. See, uncaught promise type error. Okay. That means the URL is wrong. So this fetch is basically used for making the API calls, and you just hover on it and see. Fetch is a function, okay? And after the semicolon, whatever you are seeing, it is the return type of this fetch function, okay? The return type of fetch function is a promise. Understood? Till now? Till here?
Yes.
Okay, it is expecting some info. So input, right? So that input is the URL, like from where you want to get the response. That URL you will be giving. Okay, any doubts till now? Suppose if it has any additional details, then we can give a comma and we can provide the additional information. As of now, additional information is not required. Okay. And how, since the return type of this fetch is a promise, okay, we will invoke it using dot then function.
Yeah.
Okay, now what I will do, I will just do a console log. Okay, in order to receive any data from APIs, okay, so what will happen, it has to be converted to JSON format, otherwise you will not be able to access that data in the JavaScript. This only regards to JavaScript. Okay, in the Angular it will not be like this. You can directly access the response because it's a framework which does everything by inbuilt. Okay, suppose if you are accessing this data, you were not able to see the exact data, right? Instead you will be seeing all this information, whatever is there in the headers, like what is the URL, everything details. Okay, so which means that this response has to be converted to JSON in order to access in our page. Okay, this response, how can you convert to JSON? Using JSON function. Okay, if you just hover on this JSON, it is also a one method, okay, one method or the function whose return type is again a promise. Now, if I just do console.log of response.json, what will be printed? It will tell that it's a promise. You understood why it printed promise? Why it printed promise?
Successful response because of that.
Since the return type of JSON is promise, right? In the previous, we have talked, right? Suppose if you are invoking a function, okay, whatever is returned from that will be shown, right? When you have invoked. Suppose if the return type of this function is void, then what it will return? Undefined. Here the return type is promise. Okay, then what it will print? It will print promise. Okay, So if it's a promise, if you want to access the response data, then what you need to do? You need to call this promise or invoke this promise by using dot then method. And you know, dot then receives one successful response, right?
Yes.
Which is console.log of data. Any more doubts? Understood the concept?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the fetch function. Okay, and just practice it, okay, today. Otherwise, you will not understand actually what's happening in this. Now, for example, I'm just commenting out this, and I will talk about something called async. Okay, async and await. Okay, async and await. This is also an important concept. Okay, if you understand these concepts clearly, then you will be able to understand what's happening in API calls, how the code is executing, everything you will understand. Okay, we have one function. Just a minute, I will plug on the chart. Suppose we have a function ABC, okay, and in this function, I have one response, okay, res parameter, and to this, and I am assigning this fetch call, okay. Now I don't want to just print it, okay. I just want to return this data. So what this function should actually do? So, and what I will do, I'll just, am I in mute? No. Console.log of. So what I have done, I have created one function ABC. In this function, I am making one API call and I am returning the data from that API call. Okay, now what I am expecting, this API call has to be resolved and it has to return that data, and that data has to be saved in this my res variable. Okay, and then I want to print this response. Okay, this is my expectation and I have invoked this function. Okay, now let me just try to reload. Now you see it just assigned a promise. Okay, this is why, because even before this complete line of code got executed, okay, it assigned promise and it moved to the next line and it printed response. Understood, anyone? So JavaScript doesn't wait. So this is an asynchronous call, right? It will be making some API call and then server has to receive the call. It will wait. It will then, when it is ready, it will respond. Then it will send the back to the data. By then JavaScript will not wait. It will keep on executing. It thinks that fetch is a response by default. So return type is promise. So promise got assigned and this line is printed. That's it. Okay. So in order to handle this asynchronous data, we have two keywords called async and await. What you need to do? You need to declare any function. Okay. Any function. Before that function, you need to declare async. Meaning is that in this code, the asynchronous calls are going to happen. In this function, the asynchronous calls are going to happen. Asynchronous means you are making an API call, you are waiting, then server has responded, it gave you data back, then you are assigning. So you are just waiting for the server to give you response. That is the meaning of asynchronous. Okay. So the function, whatever is asynchronous, you will just assign it the word keyword async. Okay. Now await. So here is the function which is not waiting, and we are directly assigning it and we are printing it, right? So you will tell to await. Meaning is that wait until this has been resolved and assign some data to this response. Okay. And this line of code is now executed. Okay, I will just show that. Understood the difference?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically asynchronous calls means calls which will not happen line by line. Okay. This server call will be there, but by then it won't wait for this response to come and then convert it to JSON and then data. It will just go to the next line, and whenever this data is ready, by then it will start executing this piece of code. By then this console log statement has already got executed. Okay. For example, I will show you. Now you can check which line is printed first. Okay. Here 37 called. Okay. Here response 40. Okay. Now what I will do, I will just remove this await and async. Okay. Now let me just run this code and show you. You see, first the response 40 got printed. Response 40 means line number 40 got printed. Then line number 37 got printed. You're understanding, right? It is an asynchronous call. Okay. So JavaScript will not wait for anyone. It will start executing line by line. So when the data is ready, this piece of code will get start executing. Okay. In the next concept, I will talk something about event loops. By then you will be understanding like what's happening, how this is happening and all. Okay. By now you understand means API calls will take some time. Suppose if we are assigning any API call data to one variable, it just needs some time to wait, then assign the values, right? So for that purpose, you will be using something called async, which means that this function involves some asynchronous calls or asynchronous operations. Then this call is the one, right, which is making the calls later. So you will make this function as wait until this has been resolved and assign that value to this rest and then print. Okay. Now if you just save it, okay. Now you can see in the reverse order. 37 called and then the response is printed. Any doubts, anyone till now? Any doubts? Okay.
No.
So if you want this piece of code also, can just copy paste in the chat. Okay. Just practice. Okay. If you understand this concept, then Angular will be very easy. If you understand what is promise, how to take successful response, how to take error, similar API calls will be done in Angular as well, and it will be easy for you. Any doubts? No, right? Can we wind up the session then?
Okay.
Yeah, practice this everything and can come back tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow everyone take one API from this site. Okay, for example, anything. Okay, and just display some data and show me. So even if you check, you see, you're hitting it right, it will give you some data. Okay, all these were hosted links. Okay, you can just consume these APIs and you can just print the data. Okay, there were totally 15. You can use any one of them and show the response to me. Okay, but whatever URL you are providing, right, it should be accurate. Otherwise, it will give you an error. You can even check the error scenario. Okay. Okay, then. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.